As the occupational health person in the center, I will take you by the hand and lead you where we're supposed to be going, be responsible for you, and that's part of the reason why we do sign-ins and whatnot. Don't anticipate any problems, but what we always say to any participants that come on the course, because there's a lot of moving parts and layers in simulation, if at any time you feel unwell, please raise your hand and say, I feel unwell, this is not a simulation. Because there are a lot of people coming in and out of the scenarios, and so we want to make sure that your safety is paramount. So if at any point you feel unwell, just let us know, please. Timetable for the course. So I just want to quickly introduce you to the binder that we have available for you. The first page is the one-day Introduction to Simulation workshop timetable. So it gives us a pretty good rundown of what we're going to be achieving today in a time fashion. Again, this is pretty set, but not completely set. You guys are the drivers of the course as well. So if you need a bit more time in one section, if you have more questions, we're flexible. It's all really about your learning, and please do ask questions because it's about knowledge sharing, and Claire's right. If you have a question, somebody else has the same question most likely. And if you bring up a point, there's about 10 or 12 other people that can benefit from that answer or that statement that you have. Next up, you have all the simulation slides in here that we're going to be touching on today. This is a hands-on course, but there is some material that we have to deliver to you in a PowerPoint so that we get that theory and technology, or the information across to you. So that's all here for you guys to take notes on. After that, there's some simulation resources. So I found a really nice basic troubleshooting guide and operational guide online from Kaiser Permanente in the US. It was about 103 pages. So I kind of reformatted it and cut and paste and made it pretty for you guys and brought it down to about 25 pages. It's quite nice, and we're going to be going through some sections of this today, but due to the video recording, I probably won't touch directly on flipping through each page and going through it. But this is obviously a takeaway guide for you to use as a reference. It has the three mannequins that we'll mainly cover today, which is SimMan 3G, SimMan Classic, and the SimBaby. So it has all three of those. It has a quick start guide for 3G. It also, I really liked it because it has a lot of pictures. So it has step-by-step startup guides, which we will go through, how to start the mannequin up and kind of some of the technical issues and troubleshooting. When you come to the console, which is where you run the mannequin, this is called a GUI. So it's a graphic user interface, a GUI. And so this is basically what you're going to see and what it corresponds with. This is representative of a older 3G than the one we have. So ours is only slightly different. This one box in the middle is moved down. We've got some information on how to do a room familiarization for all three mannequins, how to use the touchscreen monitor. This can be tricky, and we'll go through that when we get into the sim room as well. The parts that come with SimBaby and SimMan and how to connect them together. Also some graphics on the back of link boxes, the back of the computers, compressors. Again, we'll go through this, but it's there for you. How to initiate the touchscreen monitor, which again, that can be a bit tricky. And how to set the pulse ox thresholds and alarm thresholds for SimBaby. Because some of his vital signs obviously are different for a child, and so that it can alarm at the wrong times, and obviously you don't want that to happen. A final checklist for all three is included here, and that includes SimNewbie, which we won't be showing today, but it's very similar interface to the classic Laerdal and SimBaby mannequins, and so we'll go through that as well. Another orientation sheet. And then the same stuff for Classic as well. Following that, we have a nice section that Allie put together on moulage, and it has some recipes for you, as well as some pictures and step-by-step guides on how to make things for yourself. You'll get a bit of time to do that yourself. We utilize false cannulas here quite a bit, and we'll talk to that point during the course as well. Most of our trainees that come here, putting in an IV is not the skill that we're hoping to get. We're really focusing on the behavioral components of things. So we set up false cannulas so that they can give enough fluids and medications without having to take the time to put in an IV. burns and wounds, and then where to buy things as well. The last little bit is a few blank scenario templates so that you can write your own scenarios and see what goes into each section. And Aleka, as she mentioned, she'll be going through that as well. And then the finale of the day will be an intro to debriefing and touching on some of the key points about debriefing as well. So the aims and the objectives of this course today is going to be a very hands-on course. You're going to get up and move around. You're going to get some time to actually touch the mannequins, do some moulage, practice with the computer console, and really get a hands-on look and feel of the mannequins as well. It's going to be practical, fun, and immersive, but it is an introductory course, so there will be some PowerPoints that we provide as well to give some of the basic understanding of simulation. We're hoping to give you a behind-the-scenes look. It's, pulling back the sim curtain, so to speak. We talk a lot about moving parts and layers in simulation, especially in the center. We do a lot of high-fidelity work here. And when the participants come, they see the top of the iceberg. They see that little bit at the top, above the water line. What we do is all the stuff below, all the things that people don't see, and all that hourly kind of work to create a realistic scenario. Because what you're really doing in simulation is you're recreating reality, hopefully, for a participant. So that's what we're going to talk about in this course today, is that bottom section of the iceberg, all that stuff under the water. We'll hopefully talk about best practice and give you some real resources on how to use the mannequins appropriately and what's worked for us as far as techniques and tips and troubleshooting. And again, sharing knowledge and expertise and experience. So we feel we're pretty good at what we do, but obviously there's a ton of simulation experience and want for knowledge in this room as well. And you guys have been doing it and know what works for you. Maybe have some questions so we can all bounce ideas off of each other and share experience. Because simulation is a moving train. It's not stopping, and it's basically get on board and let's get moving. And so anything that we can learn from others and networking is really important. WA is small, and the health community within WA is small as well. So obviously we can work together and we can share emails and bounce ideas off of each other after the course. Once the course is over, we don't go away. We're still here to help you. If you have a question that you think we might be able to help you with, email us and we'll do our best to help you as well. The first thing we talk about when we bring participants into our center or into simulation in general is creating that safe zone. This is really, really important because we're going to be pushing people outside of their comfort zones in simulation. We want people to make mistakes in simulation so they don't make it in real life on real patients. So we create these scenarios that are very complex. They've got a lot of players, moving parts, maybe there's a really intense clinical situation that's going on. There's time pressure, so simulation sometimes has to compress time. There's a lot of things that are happening for the participants, and they need to feel that safety net that they can make mistakes in the safe zone, that they can watch each other on video and feel comfortable that whatever happens in the simulation center is not going to go past these walls. So a few things to set up this safe zone for learning would be location. So again, you want to have a confidential location. We've created a confidential location in that we have a center, we're running a course, we've put signs up, simulation progress, please do not disturb. We've shut our doors, so there's not people coming and going from the learning environment or people watching that haven't already been introduced to the group. So that's really important to kind of set the stage early. You want a space that accommodates all learners. So we generally like to be in a big circle or a half U when we do simulation, especially during the debriefings. And oftentimes you'll have the debriefers interspersed within the big U shape because it's about everybody being on the same level. No matter whether you're a physician, a nurse, a paramed, a housekeeper, an administrator, if you come to simulation, you all have a valued point of view and it should be valued by the team. So we all kind of sit together at the same level. We never have anybody that's debriefing or watching sit behind the actual group. They always have to sit within the group. And that's about creating that safety net as well, making sure that people that are giving you feedback aren't coming from behind you. That's really kind of a psychological thing, really. So anybody involved in the debriefing especially should be general circle. Protective components. So you just sign the confidentiality and video release forms. Again, what happens in this center stays in this center. We don't talk about anybody's performance outside of these walls. We understand and we hope that mistakes are made in the simulation center, so we push you to make mistakes. And we expect that as participants, they do not discuss anybody's performance outside of the simulation activity as well. And so we set that standard from the very, very beginning, and we utilize the confidentiality form as an agreement for that. If video is incorporated into your scenarios, you should have your participants sign a video confidentiality or video release form as well. And again, that's another safety net. They need to know where the video is going. So we have a policy here that once we've videotaped and used it for the debriefing, that we discard the video within 30 days. So you want to kind of create within your own centers what policies work for you as far as discarding the video if you choose to use video. We can talk a little bit about video towards the end of the day. It's not going to be a huge part of the course because it's to incorporate video into your debriefing is a bit of an advanced skill with regards to starting and stopping the video. Methods of employing constructive feedback. So what we talked about in simulation is team performance. It's not individual performance. So when we come together as a large group to do the debriefings, it's really not about finger pointing. It's about how could we work better as a team and what characteristics can we improve on to get the job done more effectively as a team. We also talk about standards of care. So if something happened in the scenario that maybe wasn't clinically appropriate or you felt like could be improved, again, it's not about finger pointing. It's about going back to best practice, evidence-based practice, the standards of care and the policies that we have in place, and using that as your gold standard and making sure that everybody's on the same page. It's about making sure that people are on the same shared mental model, that we uncover mental frameworks in the debriefing, and so we understand where people are coming from because that drives what people do. Their mental mind frame or mental framework drives their actions, and we'll talk about that a bit more as well. So we touch on that during this creating the safety zone after they've done the confidentiality forms and you've introduced yourself as a group. We do an icebreaker activity, and that can be just a question, what is your role in simulation? What's your question today? But it could be a very generic question, where do you want to travel to on your next trip? So it's basically to bring the group together and kind of get on the same page. Code of conduct is pretty basic. It's, treat each other with professional respect. One person talks at a time, especially during the debriefing. Please turn off your cell phones. Professional courtesy is really what we talk about at that point. Then I usually talk about tips for success. So I've kind of already mentioned a few of these, but suspension of disbelief. So simulation has come a long way. Mannequins still do have some limitations. The most obvious limitations are color and temperature of the mannequins. As healthcare providers, when you walk into a room, you can tell if a patient is sick because you have that built-in gut experience and you have that sense. When you come into a simulation room, the mannequin generally looks the same color-wise. You can do a bit of moulage, to help with the color, make it a little bit cyanotic or maybe make it a little bit pale, and we'll show you some tips about that. But for the most part, the temperature and the color are hard to depict. And there are some, depending on which mannequins you use, there are also limitations in what their abilities are as far as breathing or sounds. We'll go through a lot of that today as well. We talk about suspension of disbelief because we have to get past, as participants, that this is a simulation. We want people to treat simulation as a real experience. So we have them come into the simulation room and do a room familiarization beforehand, before they ever have to do any clinical scenarios with the mannequins. We also have them wear gloves and protective equipment so that it helps to kind of set the stage that they are playing the role of a clinician and they're acting appropriately. Everything happens in the simulation room in real time, so you're not going to request drugs and then they're going to be right there for you 5 seconds later. We want to create that reality for you, and there's a few ways we can do that. We'll talk more about that during the course of the day as well. But we remind participants that suspending disbelief is important for their learning. They'll get the most out of it if they can try to get past that it's a plastic mannequin and really treat the mannequin as a real human being. Again, perfection is not the goal. We're going to hone in on these areas of improvement. We pushed you to make mistakes in the simulation room. We want you to make mistakes here because chances are if you make a mistake in the simulation room, you're not going to make it in real life. And the last point I always tell people is to be open to viewing your practice and colleagues' practice from a new and different perspective. So this is important because we come with our own skill and experience to the simulation room and to the course. Sometimes you're not in the scenario and you're watching the scenario happen live. And that's a different perspective because you don't have that heightened cortisol level. You can see it from a different angle, so to speak. You kind of have almost a bird's eye view. When you're in the scenario, you are focused in. Sometimes you get that fixation error. And you can't see all the communication that's happening behind you. Maybe you don't notice the family member. Maybe you don't hear the alarms because the volume in the room is high. And so sometimes when you're watching the scenario, you have a great perspective, and that should be encouraged during the debriefing to get the people's viewpoints that, one, are in the scenario, but also people that are watching as well, because they really can add to the debriefing. And you might see yourself in a different light as well, especially if it's videotaped. If the scenario is videotaped and they play it back during the debriefing, you'll see yourself from a bird's eye view. And all of us have different quirks that come out when we watch ourselves on video. You'll see different things that are highlighted. You'll see some things about your practice that you may want to improve. You'll see some things, oh, I did that really well. Or you may see something from your colleague's perspective or experience, and you want to take that, as part of your practice. I'm going to incorporate that in part of my practice now. We also, during this, creating the safety zone, is create the basic assumption. So this has been gleaned from the Center for Medical Simulation Instructor course that was here in 2015. It's also known as the Harvard course. So they have a basic assumption that we believe everyone participating in activities in the center is intelligent, capable, cares about doing their best, and wants to improve. We have that showcased on the walls throughout our center, and it sets the foundation that we're all here on the same page, we're all equals, we're all here to improve, and it really sets the foundation for the course, for the participants. Simulation briefing is a bit of what we're having now, and this is, again, creating the expectation. I find that problems often happen when expectations are different than what actually occurs. So we need to set the stage and the expectations for the learners, and you do that during the simulation briefing. It prepares the learners for the simulation experience. So we talk about the use and the value of simulation. During this section, we also talk about cognitive, technical, and behavioral components during this section. So if there's anything that you're hoping that they achieve during the scenario, maybe it's a cognitive skill, needling the chest, for example, you want to introduce that topic to them, especially if they're junior trainees. If they're students or junior trainees and maybe have not had that much practice on it, you want to introduce those key cognitive skills and then give them time to actually practice those skills during the room familiarization, which I'll talk about in a second. Most of what we focus on in this high fidelity simulation center is the behavioral component. So it's that teamwork, it's that leadership, it's that role delegation, communication, the things that really break down in a crisis is what we focus on here at the center. So we focus a little bit less on the cognitive and the technical components, but depending on where your learners are at in their either learning or training, you may need to focus on that a bit more and provide that to them initially firsthand. And then you talk about the general plan of the day. So we do the simulation briefing, we talk about these crisis resource management skills, which we'll talk about, and then we show them the simulation room. So we do a room familiarization. And we'll do that for you guys as well today, so you have an idea of how we do things and what we provide the participants. Basically, again, it's creating that safety zone. We don't want to throw anyone into a scenario blind without having had a chance to maybe listen to the mannequin, understand what the capabilities and the limitations of the mannequin are. So we'll give them a general plan of the day as far as Doing a briefing, do a room familiarization, we'll do X number of scenarios and debriefings. If they're not going to be in every scenario, let them know that sometimes they'll be watching the scenario live, but please still give some feedback during the debriefing because your point of view is really important. And letting people know that they're not always going to be the team leader can be important too, because people get kind of nervous when they come to the simulation room and think, am I going to be in every scenario? Am I going to have to lead every scenario? So letting them know kind of the general plan of the day is important. Then we follow it up with a room familiarization. So again, this is an opportunity to see the simulation environment. Really important is how to call for help. This isn't their practice environment. They're coming to a center, or maybe they're coming to a hospital room where you're doing in situ simulation within your unit, and it doesn't look exactly like their patient care area. So you want to give them an idea on how to call for help and what's available, what they can use for as far as equipment, medications, trolleys, everything like that, so they can see what's available. It's not a treasure hunt. Basically, it's not a treasure hunt. You want people to go into the simulation room, be able to perform the simulation, find things as needed, because it's not about, oh, how well can you find X drug in our simulation center. It's about how can you find that drug and utilize that drug as a team. Practice with the mannequin and equipment. So again, hands-on time, seeing the limitations with the mannequin, the capabilities with the mannequin. This is really important. I keep saying this over and over again. If you don't familiarize people with the mannequin, it can affect the debriefing, because people will, I don't want to say use that as an excuse, but people don't like to be critiqued. In healthcare, we are kind of set to be the best at everything, right? I mean, there's no room for error. We're working with real patients. This is lives that matter. And so we have this mentality that we have to do it all and we have to do it perfectly. And so, you know, if you don't kind of let people know what the limitations of the mannequin are, they can bring that up during the debriefing, and it can really derail the debriefing, because they'll focus on the equipment. Well, this is not how it is in my facility. Well, I couldn't hear the mannequin, and that can really derail things. Discuss Confederate roles. So we often have Confederate actors within our scenarios, and they play a variety of roles. Sometimes they're junior staff, sometimes they're very experienced, sometimes they're very helpful, sometimes they're not so helpful. So you want to let the participants know that they will have some experience with Confederates and that they will be playing a role. So oftentimes the Confederates that we have coming through here actually are medically trained, and so if they're playing a role where they're not very helpful, we want to make sure that the participants know that that's a role that they're playing. So that's really important. And the Confederates can actually help you quite a bit during the scenario as well, and we'll talk about that during the room familiarization that we do with you guys.